Now you're listening to Fantastic Formosa with Joh Abrams in Taipei. Welcome back to another episode of Fantastic Formosa with Joh Abrams and a returning guest, Dr. Jerome Keating. It's funny, I didn't ask you, or did you tell me last week why you're a doctor? Where did you get your, what is the doctorate for?
Okay, my doctorate is from Syracuse University. And at that time, my doctorate is interdisciplinary.
Well, that's hard to explain because a lot of folks get very confused right away.
Right.
Interdisciplinary.
I can try and give you, I'll give you part of my practical reason. One of the fields, I had a master's in literature. But if I went for a doctorate in literature, when you write your dissertation, you have to write about something that no one has written about. So that means you usually have to, all the good guys have been written about.
Sure.
Hemingway, all those, Fitzgerald. So you have to write about some minute poet you don't really care about.
Oh, my God.
So I didn't want to do that. And I already had a background in literature, in philosophy, and psychology, and some religion. So I wanted an interdisciplinary where I could mix and match different disciplines and come up with a dissertation that made sense to me and was worth studying. So my dissertation is on the concept of identity in Jonathan Edwards, who was an 18th century Puritan in America, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who's 19th century transcendentalist in 19th century America, and Alfred North Whitehead, who was a process philosopher in the 20th century. And
wow, that's definitely.
I found that fascinating because each one had a different view of what the world was all about and what your identity is. But each of those had a contribution to the American psyche. You cannot deny that the Puritans have influenced us for good or bad.
Right.
If you've read the Scarlet Letter or something, Hawthorne and that.
Hawthorne. We were forced to read that as children. As a form of hypocrisy.
The Puritans were, part of the founding fathers.
Right.
So, and the Transcendentalists were a reaction against them. They were, in a way, the New England rebellion against the Puritan Jonathan Edwards.
Right.
And then Whitehead, who was British, but then came to America and taught. He was a mathematician, but then he taught philosophy in America, talked about process thought. And process thought is, in my mind, the real thinking of the 20th century, where in process thought, everything affects everything else. Everything impacts for a lesser or greater degree of anything. Nothing is isolated. So each had a different concept of identity, but they all contributed to the American psyche. And I had dreams at that time of writing a later book to bring in the Black thought, W.E.B. Du Bois. I had taught at a black college in the South. How it contributed to America. The Spanish thought, obviously, St. Augustine down in Florida, one of the earliest settlements. The Spanish influence, El Dorado, all the Southwest. So, I was thinking, what all these things that go into our American psyche, and that I never finished that book.
You never finished it.
But I did write this last book, The Paradigms That Guide Our Lives and Drive Our Souls. And from those, I was able to get kind of like what paradigm was driving Edwards, what paradigm was driving Emerson, what paradigm was driving Whitehead, what paradigm drives our thought today.
Right.
And our concept of the world, certainly like, in our lifetime, we've gone through the Cold War, and, you look at Europe and you see the French and the Germans fought each other in World War I. They'd also fought before that. Now they're buddies.
Yeah.
How does all that change?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so the paradigms. So you did get your doctorate on the dissertation part of it, and you defended it, right?
Right.
Yeah, that must have been very nervous.
It was. I had, on my board, I had people from the philosophy department, the religion department, the literature department, all critiquing the dissertation. So it was, dissertations are always stressful, but it was healthy.
Right, yeah. So then you became a doctor and you could have taught at a university.
Well, there's another interesting story of how life sometimes takes twists on you. Right. When I started my doctorate, the universities were crying for doctorates. By the time I finished it in 3 years, which was pretty fast for a doctorate.
It is.
Yeah, it's normally 4 to 5 years, but I worked extra hard on it, and to get out, because again I was married, I had kids, I had to start making money.
Right.
And it was how outside factors, by the time I finished, many universities didn't need doctorates anymore, or they had their fill.
Well, they had the baby boom generation, right? And they had got doctorates, and because they didn't go to Vietnam, they had plenty of time to get 3 doctorates and 2 masters.
So this was just like, but this is when, remember I told you that after 3 years in Syracuse, New York, I said, we got to go to the Sun Belt. See?
All right.
And so then we just picked up and moved without a job, went down south. My wife had a cousin down there who said there are a lot of universities, community colleges. You can get started, find a way in down here. So we just went cold turkey down south.
Yeah, all right. And you ended up where?
In Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, great. Famous.
And we were in Richardson, which is a suburb of Dallas. Richardson and Carrollton.
Well, that year would have been Dallas, the TV show, right? There was a famous TV show in Texas about Texas.
Oh, yeah, right. Actually, I was in that show.
Okay.
Because I had gotten involved in theater. That was another experience where you see behind the scenes. Yeah, no, JR and Bobby and all that.
Yeah, all right. You make an appearance.
I was in theater down there, and I helped found Addison Community Theater, which then became Addison Center, and now I think it's called the Water Tower Theater.
Okay.
Outside of Dallas, which is really very professional now. But we were community theater then, but they were asking for kind of like a lot of walk-on people for...
Oh, yeah.
They were shooting Dallas and in downtown, in scenes.
Just to walk around in the background.
So, yeah, I saw Bobby and Pat, and the different ones. I never met JR.
Yeah.
But I was in a couple of those shows.
If you don't know anything about this show, folks, during the 1980s, it was called Dallas, and it was about this rich oil guy in Texas named JR, and it was basically a soap opera. but it was for the evening hours. It was not like, afternoons for the wives. This had a serious fan following and adults. They would talk about it the next day at work, what happened that night on TV. It was a legendary show. I'm sure a lot of people who moved to Texas from Taiwan, go to school there, they'll hear that phrase, the TV show Dallas. This is where Dallas was filmed, or whatever. But wow, I didn't know you did plays and things like that as well.
Yeah, and I've always managed to, get little bit parts, I guess.
You're amazing. I mean, that's just out of this world. So that gives you a skill set, obviously, and you somehow end up in Taiwan in the technology field, and you got remarried here in Taiwan,
Right.
and she just recently passed, and you met her here, and she got you in with, was she working on the subway system in Kaohsiung, or?
Well, she was quite talented. She was Taiwanese, and she spoke both Taiwanese Hoklo and Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
But she had studied in Germany, so she spoke German, and she also spoke English. So she was very talented in languages.
Wow.
And she was just a secretary, and secretary has a different meaning in Taiwan.
Right.
It's more like a office accounts manager or something. You're not really, it's not secretary in the sense of the Western world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she handled basically all the company's clients from the UK and from Germany. And often the products were made in China.
Right. Wow. And you met her and fell in love and got married.
Right. That was, one of those. Yeah, they have the word yen fen, fate or destiny.
Oh, yes.
And actually, I met her partly through my brother, who had worked with AFIS, Army Air Force Exchange Service.
All right.
And he had at one time been based in Hawaii and serviced the Asian bases. He met her when he was in Germany, and was servicing Europe bases.
Okay.
But he met her at an event in Munich where they were doing some Taiwan stuff. Because
Okay.
he would follow, since he had been in Asia, he would follow things. And then, so when I was coming here, I asked my brother for 6 names of people that could help me since I was joining a new company, new world, knew everything.
Right.
Didn't know anyone out here that could help me.
Mm-hmm.
And he had been out here, and so he gave me 6 names and phone numbers.
All right.
And the luck and irony of it is that she was the first one that was home. My luggage had got tied up in customs, and I needed to go out and buy a jacket.
Okay.
This is again kind of the Yen Fen story for fate or destiny for those that understand that. I was manager level, and 3 days after I got here, the big bosses from the U.S. were coming out, and I had to give a report on the status of my division.
Oh, wow.
And I had shirt, slacks,
Ties,
tie,
everything. All right.
but I didn't have a jacket. It was still in customs.
All right.
So I had to go out and buy one.
Okay.
And so I get out my list of names and start going down. And she doesn't know I'm coming. No one on the list knew I was coming. I just had these numbers. And she helps me go to a local, I think it was a Sogo or Asia World store, and buy a jacket.
Okay.
So I could go to my meeting looking professional.
All right. Okay.
And that's how we first met. And
All right. How long before you got married?
We went together for about 4 years.
All right. And
We got married in 92. Yeah.
92. So you worked on the MRT system, the subway system, until when? When did you quit the MRT subway system?
Well, I quit. There's another interesting story that
All right.
how you get aced out on things. And sometimes when you're overseas work, you're going by contract to contract.
Right. So
you don't necessarily quit, but they run out of contracts.
Okay.
So like in Taipei, I was working with Bechtel Engineering.
Right.
Bechtel was competing in Kaohsiung with the other companies and Duluth Cather, and I had my resume in with both companies.
Okay.
In other words, you're with a company for that contract.
Right.
But after that contract, they don't have any loyalty to you.
All right.
They obviously, if you did a good job, they'll try and keep you. So, as all these companies made their bid, I was their man for technology transfer in Kaohsiung. And Duluth Cather got the bid.
Mm-hmm.
So then I switched with Duluth Cather and worked with them down in Kaohsiung. It was then after that, then we get into the high-speed rail. And again, how life throws you curveballs.
Mm-hmm.
Remember the oil thing with Otis Engineering that I told you about?
Right.
Well, this is going to be high-speed rail was just developing, and I was going to be manager of Morrison Knudsen, U.S. company, put in their bid for the high-speed rail. This was back in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of companies, the French and the Germans, TGV, ICE, they team up overseas with their high-speed rail. So they were there, and the Japanese were competing. And so actually Morrison Knudsen got the first bid. And again, I'm thinking, wow, I'm just like with Otis Engineering. I'm in oil. I'm in Texas. I'm good for life.
Right.
I figured, okay, this high-speed rail, this is going to be at least 5 years of contract. This would be a good baby to be with.
Right.
But then there was, something they couldn't work out all the finances.
Okay.
So it was rebid about 3 years later. The second bid, the French and the Germans got it, TGV and ICE. But again, it went into limbo, and they couldn't work out the financing. And then the third bid, the Japanese got it. And I hope I'm not telling tales out of school here. We always figured the Japanese somehow had a better in on this. Okay. I'll just leave it at that.
All right.
But anyway, by that time I had started teaching at the university, to
which one?
Fill time while I'm waiting, hoping for that big contract to come through. That never did, but I stayed teaching and retired as a university professor.
Where did you start teaching here in Taiwan?
I started teaching at Chinese Culture University, Wenhua Dashui, up in the mountains.
Wow, beautiful area.
Yeah, beautiful setting, cold in the winter.
Yeah, but still comfortable. Did you live up there too, or?
No, always lived downtown. We rented for a couple of years and then bought a place. We bought a place that would be near my wife's workplace, because she had always wanted to live in the Da'an area of Taipei.
All right.
It's a good area.
And she continued working where?
With her company, yeah.
And so for 5 years you were teaching at the university up there. And what were you teaching again?
I taught basically British literature, both undergrad and graduate courses. You also did a certain amount of journeyman courses, basic English writing.
Okay. Right.
That because everyone had to have. I was in the English literature department, so there were conversation classes, there were writing classes, and then there were the literature classes.
Mm-hmm. All right. Wow. So after 5 years, then what happened?
No, I stayed with them. Actually, I was there for about 8 years.
Okay.
And then I realized that the national schools have a little better retirement plan.
I see. Okay.
And so I said, I probably better start angling to switch to national school.
Right.
And I started teaching at Taipei Dashui, National Taipei University.
Okay. And so you got in there, and same subjects, different?
Same subjects, yeah.
Right. And you just graduated, or didn't graduate. You retired?
Retired from there, right. They had a kind of a mandatory retirement age.
Right. What year was that?
It was back around 2003, I think it was.
The age
I
was...
came out of retirement twice. Once you retire, you can come out if they have a special grant.
Oh, yes. So you're not actually in the program.
2 universities brought me out of retirement. Taipei Medical University, they were starting a program. I came out for them. And another one, Huafan University.
Okay.
Way up in the mountains.
What did Huafeng provide you?
Huafan is a Buddhist, I think, run university.
And you taught, what did you teach there?
Literature and English and that, yeah.
Oh, wow. Did they? What degrees did they offer, Huafeng? What degrees did they offer up there in the mountain?
They generally, I'd say they offered both. Well, they brought me out because they were starting a program with masters, and they needed doctorates up there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came out and helped bolster their credentials on that.
Right. So that's back, and then you graduate. Oh, you didn't graduate once again. I'm sorry, football. You finished that. So you're completely retired now.
Am I?
Are you going to be, what we call RED in the U.S. government? RED means retired, extremely dangerous. You strike me as a man who has many talents and might be recalled back from retirement.
But I still do a lot of writing. I write for the papers. I write for the European magazine.
What is that called?
I'll write for anyone that'll pay me.
Yeah. Okay. All right. But you've been in a lot of publications. My God, you've written for Taipei Times, I think.
Yeah. Primarily, I've written for the Taipei Times. I've written for others, but that's probably been the main bulk of my writings, op-eds for them.
And one of your books was about it had 4 editions to it, right? Which one was that? Was that?
That's Island in the Stream.
Right. Okay. And that's an interesting phrase. In the stream is a reference, of course, to being in the Taiwan Strait. In the stream, yes, because that's a great title. How did you come up with that title?
Well, it's partly, I was in Texas, and anyone back there remember Kenny Rogers?
Kenny Rogers was...
he had a song, Island in the Stream, but...
what was it about, though?
But it kind of fit Taiwan's situation, because it's in the Taiwan Strait.
Right.
Between the East China Sea and the South China Sea.
Right.
There's this flow of trade and traffic around it. There's been all the different colonizing countries that have colonized Taiwan.
Or tried to, obviously.
Yeah, tried to. There's been the battles. It's some have likened Taiwan to be the Gibraltar of Asia.
Oh, interesting.
that it's just like the Rock of Gibraltar is the entrance into the Mediterranean.
Right.
Taiwan, in a way, whoever controls Taiwan, when the British control the British, I visited Gibraltar when I was in Europe one time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, when you're on Gibraltar, you can see Africa.
Right.
From there. And of course you're attached to Spain almost.
Right.
The
who controls it now? The Brits?
Is
Are they still in charge of the Rock of Gibraltar?
Did charge to go out there?
I mean, no, Gibraltar. Is that still British controlled or?
No. I think it's Spanish.
Spanish? Okay.
I'd have to check my passport. I guess who stamped it.
Okay. I was always confused about it.
Spain. I'll plead ignorance on that one, I guess.
Gibraltar is one of these places where a lot of fake companies go. They create their we call notionals, paper companies.
Yeah.
They're not really. There's no building, no office. There's just a box and a secretary, and that's about it. But go ahead.
Yeah, no. But if you've been if you're if you read about World War II and all that,
right.
Gibraltar played a very key role there in controlling access in and out of the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
And in a way, Taiwan does that, to get for, say, China to get into blue water, deep water for your submarines.
Right.
The Taiwan Strait is very shallow.
Right.
And therefore, to get into blue water, you have to be from the east coast of Taiwan or go through the Bashi Channel.
Right.
Or between Taiwan and Japan.
Right.
And so there's, it's Gibraltar, whatever way you look at it.
Yeah, basically same thing. Yeah, Gibraltar has that same sort of dynamic.
I think it was Annette Lu, I'm not sure, that coined that.
That's
I'll bow
interesting.
to whoever claims
she
it.
said she may have said that. Yeah. So, but your book sold like pancakes. They say, like it sold a lot. 4 editions.
Yeah. Now that one, the first edition was in 2000.
This is in English, right?
As things developed politically on the island and historically, and the first edition sold out.
Right.
Would come with a new edition, and I think the last edition was 2008.
Right.
The 4th edition.
This is all in English, right?
I haven't done any more on that. That also, I'll have to also give credit to. That was co-authored with April Lin. April Lin is a history professor. We taught together at the Culture University, and April's specialty, I think if she's still teaching, is up at Damjiang, I'm not sure. But her specialty was Japanese history and Taiwan history. So we were able to put together, I would get the sources written in English, she would get the ones written in Japanese and Chinese, and we worked together, and then I would polish the whole thing. To put it up into the form, but so
this was sold in English and Chinese?
It's all in English.
Okay.
I think April later wrote a introduction in Chinese for it.
Okay.
But and
if you're too young to remember, 2006, 7, 8 were pivotal times for Taiwan as the missile crisis at the time. And the Clinton administration. It was a very historical period of time for Taiwan. But it's impressive that you had 4 editions of any book. I never published more than 1 edition of my book. But how many is an edition? I always wondered about that question. An edition is how many books? 500, 1,000, 10,000, what?
How many years?
Well, you have your first edition book, right? And how many is that? They pre-print that, right?
Right. The first edition was 2,000
copies.
And
okay.
So the second edition is pretty easy. You just clean up anything in the first edition and then you just got, I think the second edition was 2002, so, not a whole lot happens in 2 years, so
All
you
right.
can add on.
So
And
you had 4,000 copies printed, and then more. The third edition was how many copies?
Oh, okay. I think I'd have to check with the publisher. I think they were doing 1,000 copies later on each edition.
All right. I always wondered about that, regarding they always say first edition, and you have to have a first edition, like it's very valuable. And I was like, well, how many copies is a first edition? I don't understand.
You kind of think, how many friends do I have? Can I get to buy this? Not really joking on that.
I published
actually on one of them. I'm trying to think. It was on the third or fourth. A Taiwanese group was very active in the U.S. Bought about 500 copies.
Oh my gosh!
And gave one to each member of the U.S. Congress.
See, I need to get friends like that in the U.S.
Right.
to buy.
Those are the kind of friends you need.
Well, we had a scandal in Korea where a Korean lawmaker,
was very, definitely wanted Taiwan's message to be heard in the U.S. Congress.
How many pages? How many pages was it?
Was said in this book.
How many pages were the books? How many pages?
Oh, in the book, let me see. It's about.
It's a short one, right?
About 90, 100 pages.
Yeah, you can read that in
the introduction,
about an hour, right?
And if you count the photos, probably about 120.
So this is a nice, brief on Taiwan. Very quick read, educate you real quick.
Right. That was the design of it. I wanted to catch people up with the whole thing. Its complexity, but also something they could read in a way you could read on a plane flight. Because it was sold in the U.S., and if you're coming from the U.S. to Taiwan, you buy it at the store, read it on the plane over. You hit the ground running.
Yeah.
You got a basic understanding.
So these phrases like hit the ground running means you're ready to go. You're ready to make progress. You don't want to flood a new person with too many new books on, on stuff that drive in a new environment. You have the problem of culture shock when someone arrives in a country like Asia, and you also continued writing some different histories here. Let's take a look. That'll all be on the website that I'm going to put a link to. Let's see. So you speak regularly to groups. Is that true?
I don't speak. I spoke probably, was very active in probably between the years 2000 and, I'd say about 2016. I also had a group called the Breakfast Club, which would have different people as speakers, and that one was quite interesting. I hosted about 80 different presentations on that. Probably my biggest presentation was actually when Tsai Ing-wen was running for president in 2012. I hosted a meeting in 2011 where she spoke to about 85 people in English, explaining her program and that. She didn't win that election, but she came back in 2016 and won 2 terms as president. So I always like to feel we did help her some way or got her more aware in the expat community.
The expat is the phrase we use. In if you're not familiar with the phrase expat, it means expatriate or foreigner living in your country. And amongst foreigners, we'll often say, oh, that pub, that bar is an expat pub or bar, or that's an expat area where you have a lot of foreigners that live.
Right.
Yeah. But you traveled around the world to talk about your books. Were these paid trips or?
No, most of our travels, actually, my wife and I just like to visit other countries, and I did have some paid trips to the U.S., so I spoke to different Taiwanese groups in the U.S., and I did do some conferences in the Philippines, but most of our travels were more our personal interests.
Okay.
But whenever you travel, you always meet people, and you're discussing where you're from, and what they like, what you like, and so forth. And so Taiwan was always a interesting topic, particularly in the European countries, I would say.
Would you, a lot of people do a book tour when they write their new book, and they go around and they sign their book. And did you ever do that?
Did I write a book on? I did write. Well, some of my books on language learning were assignment books.
Well, signing your name to a book.
Book signing. Sorry, I misunderstood.
Bookstores will invite you to sign your book, and people line up, and they say how wonderful you are. And you say, oh, thank you. I enjoyed your book. And chances are they never read your book.
Well, there were just a couple of them, like when I would speak to these Taiwanese groups in the U.S., they definitely wanted the book because they were very pro-Taiwan, and they therefore wanted to, they were getting the book for the first time to read it. And I had a group here also. There's an interesting group, the Taiwan Civil Government, that has a philosophy or thought that, and this, they brought a case to the U.S. Supreme Court, but it was deemed political and not judicial, of Taiwan's status in the U.S. After World War II.
I see. Okay.
And if you talk to the people at AIT, and this gets complicated, but the U.S. official position, as I read it and as was told to me by people at AIT, is it is undecided on Taiwan. Now all sorts of things will be dragged into this, but that is they call it strategic ambiguity.
It's very confusing, and the phrase strategic ambiguity sounds like a chess master playing his losing game. These phrases you'll hear: strategic ambiguity. No woman would ever put up with her boyfriend using strategic ambiguity about whether they're married or getting married.
If someone said, it was kind of like, are we going to be partners? What are your intentions?
What's going on here?
If the guy answered, well, I've got strategic ambiguity.
Yeah, a lot of men in America often use the phrase, I have problems. They always say something, ambiguous problems. But this Breakfast Club thing you did forever, it was famous here. And you'd bring in different speakers every week, was it?
No, usually one or two a month.
Okay, all right. And these were different places all over Taipei.
We generally had I would seek a good venue where we could have breakfast there, and I wanted it to be, in a way, like non-profit. You had to have win-win for both sides. The restaurant or place people would have to order
something to eat. Yeah.
Right. So, and I didn't make any money off it, but it was informational. And so people would go and have their breakfast there. So that's the win for the restaurant.
Right.
And I provide the speaker, so they have their breakfast. They're paying for their breakfast, so they're not losing anything or not paying anything extra.
Right.
And they're meeting some very interesting people. And if you could meet the future president of Taiwan at the Breakfast Club,
or the CEO of a major corporation, or someone like yourself, even someone very interesting that's had a lot of experiences here.
Yeah, and you go down the list of people we had. There were some very prominent people, speakers there. And, it was just to keep people updated on Taiwan and provide them access to people like, in politics or in business, and at the same time provide those people access to the public.
Right.
A couple times we had meetings at the Li Fa Yuan, the legislature. And I would have legislators speak, and they would often cover the budget or the breakfast with their budget, so that was nice.
Okay.
And so our people came down and had a free breakfast, and they got to talk to legislators. And what more can you ask for? You can talk to legislators. Why is the country being run this way or that way? What's the point of this program? What's the purpose of this? And you get a free breakfast at the same time. How can you turn down a deal like that?
Yeah, this was
so for me, it was never, I was just the middleman.
Right.
Mix and match here.
Well, these kinds of things have at universities in America, and if you attend university if you're Taiwanese and go there, you may find something like that on campus, on different areas. Maybe they might have several types of breakfast clubs. Some might be too expensive for you. Some might be you're not really interested in the subject. But this one was interesting. Is it still operational? Is it still running? Or?
It is. I turned it over after my wife died. I kind of pulled back a little, and I turned it over to Linda Arrigo. Linda's a very interesting American pro-Taiwan person. And another person that she works with, and they still run the Breakfast Club.
Great. Okay.
And they schedule speakers on topics related to Taiwan and China and everything.
Right. So if you were going to write another book, what would you write it on? If you have another book idea. Or are you working on another book?
Another book? Or?
Yeah, are you working on another book?
Well, a book that I'm actually working on is, I feel I've written enough about Taiwan. I've written 5 books on Taiwan. 3 have been translated into Chinese. And I've written hundreds, thousands of op-eds, and I'm getting more philosophical in my old age. And so this one book, The Paradigms That Guide Our Lives and Drive Our Souls, was one that my most recent book, and in it deals with the paradigms that drive our lives and why we see the world this way and why we try to change the world this way. What's in our mind. And remember my doctoral dissertation on why do the Puritans see the world that way? Why do the Transcendentalists see that way? Why did the process people see the world their way? And each one, and of course, you have to think of, how does Taiwan see itself? How does the U.S. see itself? And the U.S., has had its own changing role. And if one goes way back, It took a little while for the U.S. to get into World War II.
Right.
If you do study that,
Reluctant.
they were very
reluctant.
isolationist.
Right.
You know, that was a paradigm of kind of, well, that's their problem, not ours. And
No.
later on, they did a paradigm shift and say, well, it is more than their problem. It's becoming our problem.
Yeah. We
Of course,
in
Pearl
America
Harbor helped with that.
yeah, Americans are legendary late starters at every game. But look, Jerome, Dr. Keating, please, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, my pleasure.
And we're going to end this episode, and thank you for listening.